Okay, let's talk about percents, fractions, and decimals. I know, for a lot of us, those words can bring back some not so great memories from math class. But what if I told you they're not separate, complicated things at all? What if they're just three different ways to say the exact same thing? Today, we're going to crack the code on this so-called language of numbers. So, to get us started, here's a question. Why is it always percent? Why are we so obsessed with the number 100? Why not per 10 or per 25 or something else? It seems kind of random, doesn't it? But trust me, there's a really clever reason behind it. And here's the answer. It's all about history. See, before decimals, like 0.14, were a common thing, people needed a super simple, universal way to talk about parts of a whole. And percentages were the solution. It was a brilliant tool invented out of pure necessity, not just some random rule a math teacher made up. So let's dig into that a little bit more. Why was 100 the magic number they landed on? Well, the clue is hiding in plain sight, right there in the name. Percent comes from the Latin phrase per centum, which literally translates to for each 100. The entire system is built right on top of that one simple idea.
And this is where the genius of it really clicks. By making everything out of 100, it creates a common playing field, a standard for comparison. You can instantly see that 52% is bigger than 51%. But quick, which is bigger, 7/8 or 6/7? See? That's way harder. Percentages just make everything so much more intuitive.
Which brings us to the main idea I want you to walk away with today. The best way to think about these things isn't as separate math problems, but as three different languages that are all used to express the very same idea. Here's the bottom line. Whether you say 1/2, 0.5, or 50%, you're talking about the exact same amount of something. You're just using a different vocabulary to describe it. It's all just parts of a whole. So first up, we've got the percent. Think of this as the universal translator. It takes any proportion, no matter how weird, and standardizes it to a number out of 100. That way, everything is easy to compare at a glance. Then you've got the fraction. This is the most direct language, right? It literally shows you the parts you're dealing with. But here's the real aha moment with fractions. Every single one is just a division problem in disguise. 1/2 is really just a prettier way of writing 1 divided by 2. And finally, there's the decimal. This is the language that's all based on the number 10 and place value. And you know what it really is? It's the answer you get when you actually do the division that the fraction was telling you to do. See how they all connect to each other? Okay, so if they're all just different languages, how do we get fluent? How do we become translators? Well, it's actually way simpler than you might think. Let's walk through the conversion triangle and see just how easy it is to jump between them. All right, the easiest translation by far is between decimals and percents. It's just a little two-step dance. To go from a decimal like, say, 0.55 to a percent, you just slide that decimal point 2 places to the right, and boom, you've got 55%. To go the other way, from a percent back to a decimal, you just slide it 2 places to the left. 87% becomes 0.87. That's it. Now, how about from a percent to a fraction? This is also super straightforward. Just remember what percent means. Per 100. So you just take your number, stick it on top of 100, and then you just simplify that fraction if you can. And this visual makes it crystal clear. 10% literally just becomes the fraction 10 over 100. And since you can divide both the top and the bottom by 10, it simplifies down really nicely to its cleanest form, 1/10. All right, for our last trick, turning a fraction into a percent. This one is really just a two-step move, where we combine the skills we just talked about. First, you solve the fraction's hidden division problem to get a decimal. Then, you just do that simple two-step decimal dance to turn it into a percent. Let's take the classic fraction, 1/4. Remember, it's a division problem, so we just do 1 divided by 4. That gives us our decimal, 0.25. And just like that, step 1 is already done. And now for the final step. You take that 0.25, you slide the decimal 2 places over to the right, and what do you get? 25%. And there you have it. You can now officially translate between all three of these number languages. So you might be thinking, okay, that's cool, but why does this actually matter? Well, because this isn't just a bunch of abstract math for a test. This is math that you use out in the wild, probably every single day. I mean, really think about it. You're calculating a 20% tip for your server. You're trying to figure out if that 50% off sale is really a good deal. You're following a recipe that calls for 3/4 of a cup of flour. You're reading a news article about a 5% jump in inflation. It is everywhere. Here's a perfect real-world scenario. You see a sign for 75% off an $84 jacket. Now, calculating 75% of 84 in your head sounds annoying, right? But what happens if you translate 75% into a fraction? It's 3/4. Now, calculating 3/4 of 84 is way easier. A fourth of 84 is 21, times 3 is 63. That's your discount. Or take the business world. Understanding percent change is absolutely crucial. If a company's revenue goes from $10 million to $11 million, that's a $1 million increase on a $10 million base. 1 out of 10, that's 1/10, or a 10% increase. Knowing how to do that quickly is fundamental. But here's the thing. Being fluent in this language of numbers isn't just about getting the right answer on a calculator. It's about understanding what's really being said, and sometimes, more importantly, what's being left unsaid. So let's say you're in a business meeting and you hear this. Our profit margin is at 12%, which is up 3% from last year. On the surface, that sounds pretty good, right? But what does up 3% actually mean here? Because that phrase is dangerously ambiguous. And this is our final and most important point. Does up 3% mean it went from 9% to 12%? That would be an increase of 3 percentage points. Or does it mean it increased by 3% of last year's margin, which would mean last year was actually around 11.7%? Those are two very different stories about the company's health. Understanding the language of numbers means you know which questions to ask, and knowing that is everything.